smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Good morning. It is Friday. Welcome to NewsWire on SportsGrid. I'm Craig Mish. Great to be with you here for the next hour before tip-off of more college basketball conference action. Coach Young will be with us to preview all of the games in about 30 minutes from now. So stay on the grid here on NewsWire. We'll cover it for you. Also, Matt Lutovsky for the latest on the National Football League free agency. Jim Gazzale from Legal Sports Report, and constant updates and previews as March Madness has begun and the NCAA tournament begins next week. But let's get started with a story that just broke about 45 minutes ago, a trade in the National Football League that includes draft picks. The Minnesota Vikings are without a quarterback, at least for the time being, it would appear. Maybe this is a sign that they're looking to move up in the NFL draft, even beyond what they did today. They make a trade to acquire the number 23 overall pick in the NFL draft, and they get it from the Houston Texans. They send Houston back a number 42 pick this year and a second rounder next year as well. You see, those are the full details, but the bottom line is Minnesota acquiring Houston's first round pick for the upcoming draft this year. So maybe the Vikings' plan is indeed to start over with a new quarterback. There are several that are projected to go in the first round. Yesterday, the Los Angeles Chargers did what they did the day before, which is shed payroll. First, it was Mike Williams, and a Chargers lifer from San Diego sent out packing. How about this? Keenan Allen, no longer a member of the Chargers. Didn't see that coming, right? Goes to the Chicago Bears. A fourth-round pick is in return. DJ Moore and Keenan Allen at wide receiver for the Bears, quarterback to be determined next season. And also the Kansas City Chiefs finally went out and got a free agent at wide receiver. It only took like 3 years, but they got Marquise Brown. Brown, of course, played with the Arizona Cardinals. He played with the Baltimore Ravens. And now Patrick Mahomes has a new target for the upcoming season, $11 million contract there. All right, let's get to the rest of the NFL headlines. Dak Prescott is being investigated for alleged assault. And the investigation is part of a complaint filed Wednesday back in 2017. On Monday, Prescott said he's being extorted for over $100 million from the woman and her attorneys. New quarterback for the Washington Commanders next season, no question about that. Sam Howell is out. He was sent to the Seattle Seahawks. So in all likelihood, Howell will either back up Geno Smith, play ahead of Geno Smith, who knows, but Howell is gone, no longer a member of the Washington Commanders. Eric Armstead signs with the Jacksonville Jaguars, 3 years, $51 million. And wide receiver Curtis Samuel signs with the Bills, 3 years, $24 million, up to $30 million. It can be at $15 million guaranteed as we wind down within a week of NFL free agency. Needless to say, a hot topic of conversation on the early line was that big trade that went down yesterday. The Los Angeles Chargers, their cornerstone wide receivers, you could probably say, and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, at least over the last few years, are now both gone, with Keenan Allen going to the Chicago Bears. Here's what Donnie Rightside and Ben Stevens think about the deal.
More NFL news and notes after a busy Thursday in terms of trades around the National Football League, when that legal tampering window opened up on Monday afternoon at noon Eastern time. We saw the free agency flurry, all the big signings, all the big names, some more on Tuesday into Wednesday when the league year officially began. The story of Thursday was trades around the National Football League. Rondale Moore, Desmond Ridder, they get swapped for one another. Sam Howell, no longer with the Commanders, traded out to Seattle for some draft capital in return. And then a big one overnight. The Chargers trading away Keenan Allen to Chicago. In return, the Bears will send back a fourth-round pick and only a fourth-rounder. Donnie, Keenan Allen has spent all 11 years of his NFL career up until this point with the Chargers organization. He is a 6-time Pro Bowler, 5 times in the last 6 years. And last year, still despite playing in only 13 games for Los Angeles, had 150 targets, 108 grabs, over 1,200 receiving yards, and 7 receiving scores. When Justin Herbert was healthy and out there, there was no doubt Keenan Allen was his favorite and top target. Now Keenan Allen in Chicago with the Bears.
How about that? A new bear with Keenan Allen. Now, good news on the baseball field for the New York Yankees, and they needed it. Garrett Cole looks like he won't need surgery. He visited with Dr. Elatrash in Los Angeles, and at least for now, it appears he does not have to have surgery on his right elbow, although he's not going to pitch in April in all likelihood. The Atlanta Braves are bringing back an old friend for the third time, Adam Duvall, 1 year, $3 million contract. How about this tennis match yesterday that was played at the Parabas Open between Carlos Alcaraz and Alexander Zverev? There was a swarm of bees. I don't know if you saw this on social media that stopped the match for about an hour. Bees taking over the tennis court. And naturally, no one was bit, I don't think. All right. Arizona Coyotes have approved to a new bid on a Phoenix land for new arena site. They need it. The Coyotes are playing in a substandard development right now for hockey. The Arizona State Land Department Board of Appeals unanimously approved $68.5 million appraisal of the 95 acres that they're looking at to build it on Thursday. All right, let's get to the NCAA tournament. Of course, a lot happening coming up. Conference tournaments, crazy upsets yesterday. $2.7 billion in wagers expected on the NCAA tournament. That's an estimate as of right now. $2.72 billion could be wagered on both tournaments, by the way, the men's and the women's, associated with American sportsbooks. Yesterday in the ACC tournament, Duke is out. NC State gets the win, 74-69. Duke was 10.5-point favorites. They will play in the NCAA tournament, but a bad finish to their season, losing to North Carolina and then NC State. The National Labor Relations Board are going to represent Dartmouth's men's basketball players. Of course, they are unionizing and talking about doing their own thing. We'll see what the future holds for that. And DePaul has hired former Buckeyes head coach Chris Holtmann as their head coach for college basketball moving forward. In the National Basketball Association, playoff spots are being clinched, and the Boston Celtics, no surprise, are in. That's not going to be enough for their season, by the way. They clinched the first spot in their win against the Suns. They've won 15 out of their last 17. Luka Doncic misses last night's game against the Thunder. Of course, he exited against Golden State earlier in the week. Ben Simmons looks like his season is over. He has back surgery for the second time in 3 years. And Kobe White, he had an MRI of Chicago Bulls. He revealed a hip sprain. He was the most improved player candidate, averaging 19.7 points a game for the Chicago Bulls this upcoming season. And that's the very latest. We'll update you on the Players' Championship in Jacksonville also in about 30 minutes from now, where we could have a fantastic finish with some of the big names. Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, all off to great starts after the first round at the Players' Championship. Coming up next here on the show, we dive into the latest in the National Football League. Quarterbacks are moving all over the place. It's hard to keep up. We call it a carousel. Matt Lutovsky is going to join us next, talk about where they were, where they're going, and what it potentially affects. And then, of course, we have Jim Gazzale in the house. We're going to talk about sports betting in the state of Indiana. So those of you in the Midwest interested as to what the profits are for that state and how many people are betting on sports, stay tuned for that. And then Coach Young breaks down all of the games in the SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, and everywhere else. We'll be right back.
You can worry about Kentucky's maturity. I get it. Are you making a good point about it? Absolutely. They're young. They're inexperienced. They're going to make a ton of mistakes. Sometimes you can worry about their defensive tenacity. But boy, they got shot creators and they got shot makers.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Betting in-game, there's a big difference, right? Like the computer changes the number so often. Like, I tried to get this in right now, but in reality, as I saw plus 165 in the arena, they're hitting the shot. And I'm getting this like a couple of seconds late. And even the sports book, like, technology can only travel so fast.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
How about this? Nikola Jokic, heavy favorite here to minus 170 price, followed by SGA at plus 250, and Luka Doncic at a 7-1 price.
It would require a whole lot from Luka to 15 of the next 20 games he has to have triple doubles, something absurd. And it really just comes down to Jokic being amazing, doing everything that he's doing. I hate to say it, but he's probably had this locked up the second Embiid was announced out.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. For people who checked out of the NFL season after it ended, you're going to be in for a shock when training camp opens in a few months because so many players have changed locations, maybe more than any other offseason we've seen before. Matt Lutovsky's with us from Sporting News. We'll see if we can break it all down. And Matt, active is not even the word for it as far as free agency and trades. And I mean, you generally don't see these kind of quarterbacks just moving all over the place. Going to have new starters everywhere. We haven't even got to the draft yet. This is full-on madness.
Yeah, frenzy. Everyone likes to say free agent frenzy just because the alliteration, but it really has felt that way this year. There has been a lot of movement. It started quickly. It started with the running backs right away, which last year running backs really hung around for a while, dragged out. They weren't getting the money they wanted, and I had barely woken up on Monday, and half of these big-name running backs had agreed to deals. Then you mentioned the quarterbacks just going all over, who's going to start, who's going to back up. We had wide receivers come in strong here the last couple of days. There's been a lot going on for sure, and it's I think people love it, who love the NFL, trying to keep up with the offseason, and hopefully they've kept up completely because it's been difficult.
Yeah, it has been hard to do. I'm waking up too, and some of these minor ones, I'm like, wait a second, when did that happen? All right, so let's look at the quarterbacks here. Now, the starters, we think, going into next season that were signed or traded, et cetera, or, signed new deals, Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, and Baker Mayfield. I think it's fair to say that all those three guys will be starting next season. Baker back with the Bucs, Wilson new with Pittsburgh, Cousins new with Atlanta. So Gardner Minshew has a path right now, let's be honest, Matt, to starting with the Raiders. I don't know if that's going to end up happening. Joe Flacco will back up Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis, but naturally the backup does play at some point of the season. And look, I mean, Jameis Winston, if he was going to pick a location, this is not a bad one, I think, to pick for him with the Cleveland Browns. So I guess we can start there. The three are the obvious ones, and then the others will be waiting for playing time. But as I said, the backup usually gets a start now that there's 17 games in the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think you're right that Minshew signing is sort of the most interesting right now, at least in terms of where the Raiders are and what their long-term plan is. They lose a quarterback, they lose their starting running back, and they haven't replaced him yet. Or at least they replaced him with Minshew, but I think people expected maybe something bigger than that. Gardner Minshew had a very nice year for the Colts, got them almost to the playoffs. And so I think people are wondering, is this guy a legit starter? Can he take a team to the playoffs? It's starting to look like it. Maybe we'll find out. Obviously, we know there's a lot of good quarterbacks in this draft, so maybe the Raiders have a plan there, but it seems unlikely they'll get into that coveted top 3. So there's still dominoes to fall. I think that's sort of the most interesting thing here, is what more could happen down the line. And I think you're right about Flacco. I think you're right about Winston, especially Winston. And that's a team that keeps adding wide receivers. They keep going, you know what? You're a wide receiver. Your team doesn't want you more, but you've shown talent in the past. Come on over to Cleveland, and we'll try to make something happen with you. And given Watson's history here the last couple of years, I wouldn't surprise to see Jameis Winston playing a very key role next season. I don't know if that's a good thing, but look, I mean, Cleveland made the playoffs last year, starting 5 different quarterbacks during the regular season. So this does seem like a better situation for them than what happened last year, where Joe Flacco did come through for them. Can he do that again if needed? We know Anthony Richardson, I think even after 1 year, has to be considered injury prone just because of his playing style. And so Joe Flacco could get thrown into that super sub role again.
Yeah, he could. I mean, again, a lot of these guys end up playing at some point. Same with the list we're going to look at next. These are backups strictly, I think, going into the season. Maybe you would take exception with me saying Sam Darnold is a backup, but I mean, I think the Vikings are going to draft a quarterback. Man, I don't see any other path for them right now. Rudolph will be a backup in Tennessee, I assume. Same with Jacoby Brissett. Same with Mitchell Trubisky, Marcus Mariota in Washington, Tyrod Taylor with the Jets. Darnold is the one name because he's got the path that there's you would say like there's a possibility, but maybe Minnesota's that team that trades up on draft day. I mean, they made that trade today, Matt, and maybe they're just not done. And I don't think they're getting the number 1 pick in the draft, and I also think the Bears are not going to deal with them. So beyond that, in the same division, it looks to me like it's one of the other quarterbacks. Maybe it's Drake May or Jalen Daniels or someone like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think right now we can say Sam Darnold's their starter with a big asterisk. But yeah, it feels like a move is coming. Whether they get into that top 3, whether they take a J.J. McCarthy with the pick they're at, or maybe they prefer Bo Nix, whoever it is, I just have a hard time thinking they're going into the season with Sam Darnold being the starter. Tyrod Taylor is the one that makes me laugh right now, considering all the rumors swirling around their starter. I'm not calling Tyrod Taylor a backup. I'm calling Tyrod Taylor the vice president right now of that quarterback room. And I think you look at some of these others, as of right this minute, I guess Jacoby Brissett leads the depth chart. But certainly I think most of us expect him to be in a backup role given the contract he signed for. What's crazy about all this, we just put up all these quarterbacks who have changed teams, and yet Justin Fields is still a member of the Chicago Bears. And that's still a massive domino that is yet to fall in this entire carousel. That's going to affect, at least one of the teams that we've probably already talked about, at least one of these teams sitting there with a high draft pick. And that to me is what's amazing, because most people thought that was going to be the first domino. Most people thought that was going to fall before Monday and free agency started. It's been weird. It's already been weird, and it's still going to get weirder. That's the beauty of the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like the Bears general manager indicated that Fields would be moved so they could figure things out, and that didn't happen at all, which is, sort of strange. Okay, talk about strange. Derrick Henry in a different uniform. That is going to be unusual. Of him with the Baltimore Ravens next season. Saquon Barkley goes to the Eagles. Josh Jacobs to the Packers. And then Aaron Jones says, to heck with this. Let me get out of here. He goes to the Vikings. Tony Pollard to the Titans. DeAndre Swift capitalizes on his season that he had. He goes to the Chicago Bears. I mean, I think they're pretty much all open situations for all of these names, I would say. Matt, did you like any of these moves more than the other?
Well, the move I liked the most actually wasn't on that list, and that's Austin Eckler to the Commanders. I thought they got him at a real nice price. They've had a real nice offseason in general. And some of those lesser moves, given the money, I thought made a lot of sense. The Texans wound up giving Mixon that bigger contract extension, which I wasn't a huge fan of after they made a nice trade. I love Gus Edwards, too, for the money. But, yeah, you got a lot of players on that first list who are good players. They're going to make an impact. I think Derrick Henry, just the perfect marriage of team and player, perfect fit. decent contract. I thought Swift was an overpay. I thought Saquon was a bit of an overpay, but I get it for a team like that feels they're right on the door of breaking through, and they're obviously hoping he's going to be their Christian McCaffrey. But they never throw the ball to their running backs. They got a new offensive coordinator now. Maybe they will. But to really take advantage of Saquon Barkley, I think you have to throw more to your running backs. So it remains to be seen if they'll do that with them. But these are all big-name players. You know, Josh Jacobs was a nice move, big contract, but he's still got enough youth. I think it's worth it. Aaron Jones on a one-year deal makes sense for the Vikings. So there weren't too many gross overpays. It feels like this market has just really settled itself. These guys got paid about what they should, and everything made sense for the teams. Tony Pollard's a little weird since they already have Tajay Spears. Feels like a little overlap of skill sets, but a decent deal. Titans are making a lot of moves with the Calvin Ridley move too, so they're really juicing up the offense with the new coaching staff. And I like I said, I think those moves made sense after we all clutched our pearls last year about the running backs and, they need to get paid. Seemed like everything made sense this year.
Yeah, no, it did. All right, Matt, great stuff. Great breaking it down. We'll see you again next week. We'll see where the next chips fall. Thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Matt Lutovsky from the Sporting News with us. We've got Jim Gazzale up next to break down the latest sports betting in Indiana.
You can worry about Kentucky's maturity. I get it. Are you making a good point about it? Absolutely. They're young. They're inexperienced. They're going to make a ton of mistakes. Sometimes you can worry about their defensive tenacity. But boy, they got shot creators and they got shot makers.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Betting in-game, there's a big difference, right? Like the computer changes the number so often. Like, I tried to get this in right now, but in reality, as I saw plus 165 in the arena, they're hitting the shot. And I'm getting this like a couple of seconds late. And even the sports book, like, technology can only travel so fast.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
How about this? Nikola Jokic, heavy favorite here at a minus 170 price, followed by SGA at plus 250, and Luka Doncic at a 7-1 price.
It would require a whole lot from Luka to 15 of the next 20 games he has to have triple doubles, like something absurd. And it really just comes down to Jokic being amazing, doing everything that he's doing. I hate to say it, but he's probably had this locked up the second Embiid was announced out.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
We close out the week here on this Friday with our guest contributors from Legal Sports Report. You can read all about the things going on in sports wagering over at LegalSportsReport.com. Jim Gazzale joins us each and every Friday ahead of the weekend to break down what's happened during the week, and not a ton of controversies this week. Jim, good news. We got sports betting being legalized in North Carolina. That was a really hot topic, and happy to go over some of the numbers with you here today. How are you?
Yeah, doing good, Craig.
Let's start off with Indiana, a state we don't talk about all that much. I know sports betting is very popular there this time of the year in particular, but what has the last quarter looked like?
Yeah, Indiana is kind of one of those states that, we don't talk about all that often. And I feel like, I don't know, for whatever reason, I've just kind of been drawn to their monthly revenue reports over the last couple of months, just trying to get a sense of how that market is playing either positively or negatively in the wake of Kentucky legalizing their sports betting market, which happened in September. And what we've seen since then has been into February, 4 straight months of year-over-year gains in that monthly handle in Indiana, which is a positive sign, I would say. But I think if we look a little bit further back, there's 2 ways to kind of look at it. And, admittedly, it's kind of tough to get a, really concrete, definitive answer just looking kind of month to month. But I think, like I said, the positive spin on the Indiana market in the more recent short term would be, like I said, 4 consecutive months of year-over-year handle growth, which is a positive sign. If you wanted to spin it and give it a little bit more of a critical eye, we could look back even further to early 2023 when Ohio launched its online market in January of 23, and that really had an immediate negative impact on Indiana. It took about 6 months, so halfway through 2023, for Indiana to kind of find its footing again, kind of regain that footing after Ohio launched. We did see some year-over-year declines in Indiana in the immediate aftermath of Ohio opening up its sports betting market. Then, we saw a month or 2 of stabilizing, if you will, for Indiana, and then Kentucky came online. So the negative sort of look at that would be, perhaps Ohio had a larger impact than Kentucky did. Certainly the numbers bear that out. The other thing that we're kind of looking at is the numbers now in January, February 2024 are really only getting back to and approaching those early 2022 numbers when there was limited competition for Indiana. So, if you were, looking for a more pessimistic angle for Indiana, you could argue that, yeah, the growth has been there in the last couple of months, but it's still really only approaching those early 2022 levels, and a lot kind of remains to be seen what's going to happen here with Indiana. But, definitely on a little bit of an upswing here in the last couple of months, and a positive sign, I would say, given just the added competition that they faced kind of on both sides here, from Ohio to start 2023 and Kentucky to end 2023.
Yep, I feel like that's a fair point. Now, the next point that I would make before we review the numbers coming in from the state of Maryland is that, Jim, if I had to guess, and maybe you would tell me if I'm wrong, that most states here in the U.S. would probably see a dip in sports wagering just in general with the end of the National Football League and college football season. So before we get into the numbers with Maryland, I would ask you, do you see that around the country here, or is Maryland different than some others?
No, yeah, it's an excellent question, Craig. And we do see that drop-off start to happen in February. You might get a little bit of a boost in March with the March Madness, but, once the college basketball tournaments end, and we get into, baseball being the main sort of offering into the summer, you're right. We do see that sort of downward trend through the spring and into the summer, that kind of seasonality of the sports betting calendar certainly starts to creep up here in February as the NFL season winds down for sure.
And as we close it out, Jim, to discuss everything happening in New York, I don't know if you wanted to touch on Maryland, by the way, before we move.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. So looking at the report from Maryland in February, again, tough to kind of glean any concrete sort of trends month over month, but something that did stick out to me in Maryland was just the win rate or the hold percentage for sportsbooks there. It dipped below 10% for only the third time since online sports betting has been available since November 2022 in Maryland. And as we've seen in the last couple of months, the average hold percentage for sportsbooks is kind of ticked up, and it's right around that 9%. I recall probably 6-8 months ago, I think we were saying that the average was in that 7 or 8% range. So still above average in Maryland. I'm sure the public having a successful run with the Super Bowl, with the Chiefs winning, probably played into this figure a little bit as well. Overall, in 2023, the average win rate for sportsbooks is about 11%. So, not much to sort of glean from just kind of like a minor blip on the hold radar for Maryland sportsbooks, but noteworthy nonetheless. Just overall betting volume there, $442.6 million bet in February. That was up 30% from February 2023. And one other thing that we've kind of talked about a bunch over the last few weeks, Craig, ESPN bet, they had about 5% of that online handle in Maryland. One of their lowest shares of market in the online world in the states where they're live. 5% in Maryland, one of their lowest.
Let's get into New York. I think that there's some very intriguing numbers here coming in from their sports revenue, Jim. Maybe not the numbers as much as the percentages that are being divvied up between FanDuel and DraftKings. And I understand that, look, every state is going to be different. People are going to bet where they choose and where they like to choose. But if you're telling me that most states have 3/4 of the sports betting revenue going to FanDuel and DraftKings, it bodes well for them. I'm not sure it bodes well for anyone else.
Yeah, and it's tough, right? And we keep seeing these sort of, I'll call them, rung 2, rung 3, rung 4 operators kind of adjusting their business operations, pulling out of certain states, and it's tough to compete with FanDuel and DraftKings. And in New York, I think obviously the numbers there are just far and away beyond most every other state, but those two combined for 75% of overall sports betting handle in New York in February. $1.77 billion in total for the state of New York in February. The one interesting thing that stuck out to me from the February report in New York was PointsBet, and they made the switch over to the Fanatics Sportsbook in New York on February 29th, so the last day of the month. But prior to that, they racked up $82.9 million in bets for February, which is their most successful, highest volume month in New York since launching. And I'm not entirely sure what was kind of behind that. I know me personally being in New York, I did receive a handful, more than a handful of emails from PointsBet throughout the month, just letting you know that they were going to be making this switch over to the Fanatics Sportsbook finally. I believe it was one of the last, if not the last state to make that switch, after Fanatics bought out PointsBet back over the summer there. So perhaps that flurry of emails, kind of letting people know this was coming, and telling them about the fan cash and all of that, perhaps that drove a bunch of this, sort of wagering volume. It did help PointsBet / Fanatics kind of leapfrog Bet Rivers in New York for the first time. They're still trailing, though, behind MGM and Caesars, and obviously FanDuel and DraftKings. Those two, like I said, just combined for 75% of the overall betting volume in New York. But, big numbers still coming out of New York. I'm interested to see how Fanatics does now in its first full month in March as the Fanatics Sportsbook. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the next couple of weeks, Craig.
All right. Well, Jim, have a good weekend. Great stuff. Thanks for coming on NewsWire. Really appreciate it.
All right, Craig. See you next week.
All right. Revenue up in New York, 75% going to FanDuel, DraftKings, everybody else. Got to make your way in, I suppose. All right. Coming up next, we got Ben Stevens previewing the NCAA championship odds as we get closer to the tournament beginning next Tuesday. In addition, Coach Young is with us to preview some of the big games in college basketball today. Get ready. Conference championships all across the board tonight, tomorrow night, and of course Sunday as well. We'll be right back.
You can worry about Kentucky's maturity. I get it. Are you making a good point about it? Absolutely. They're young. They're inexperienced. They're going to make a ton of mistakes. Sometimes you can worry about their defensive tenacity. But boy, they got shot creators and they got shot makers.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Betting in game, there's a big difference, right? Like the computer changes the number so often. Like I tried to get this in right now, but in reality, as I saw plus 165 in the arena, they're hitting the shot, and I'm getting this like a couple of seconds late. And even the sports book, like technology can only travel so fast.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
How about this? Nikola Jokic, heavy favorite here to minus 170 price, followed by SGA at plus 250, and Luka Doncic at a 7-1 price.
It would require a whole lot from Luka to 15 of the next 20 games he has to have triple doubles, something absurd. And it really just comes down to Jokic being amazing, doing everything he's doing. I hate to say it, but he's probably had this locked up the second Embiid was announced out.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. If you're thinking about betting on the NCAA tournament, maybe taking a team to win the national championship, your buy low opportunity on some teams is probably right now, because we've got the conference championships coming up this weekend. And then, of course, the seedings begin on Sunday night. We've got full coverage here on SportsGrid. And then it all begins with the play-in games coming up on Tuesday. So let's take a look here on this Friday at the futures odds for the NCAA tournament and the Final Four. Here's Ben Stevens.
Craig, we enter the weekend of Conference Championship Week in men's college basketball. Now just 2 days away from Selection Sunday. Conference tournament titles will be at stake tomorrow and on Sunday to determine automatic berths to the NCAA tournament and those teams battling for an at-large bid to the big dance as well. So before we get in to the final weekend before the madness truly begins in the NCAA tourney, here's where the national championship odds around the country stand at this current juncture. You will see LJ Cryer and Houston, the number 1 seed in the Big 12, rolling through their opener in the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City yesterday against TCU. A couple of cents actually shaved off the price for the Cougs. It was plus 650 entering the conference tournament. Take a $0.50 off, now 6-1. But Houston still looking up at the reigning national champs. That would be Connecticut. UConn plus 450. UConn into the semifinal Fridays on the Big East tournament against St. John's. What a matchup on this Friday evening. It is going to be at Madison Square Garden. That number has remained for Connecticut at plus 450, plus 480 earlier this week. A couple of cents shaved off, but that's been as low as it has gone all year long. Purdue, the only other team, Craig, in triple digits, an 8-1 number for the Boilermakers, who enter the fold in Minneapolis on this quarterfinal Friday at the Big Ten tournament. They draw Michigan State. Not exactly the easiest opener for Matt Painter and his Boilermaker team. Arizona got past USC in a big way yesterday. They're 14-1. Tennessee into action at the SEC tournament on this Friday. 16-1 for the Volunteers. North Carolina and Auburn, both 20-1 to round out this list. So, Craig, we go national championship into a step before that. Final Four weekend, opening weekend of April in Phoenix, Arizona. You can see these prices pretty similar in order, Craig, to what we just saw for the national title. Caleb Love and Arizona, plus 300, that fourth best number. But when you look at the top three, this is the big three, as the committee will share. UConn, Houston, and Purdue have already locked up 3 of the 4 number 1 seeds for the NCAA tournament. UConn favored, minus money, minus 110 to reach the Final Four. Houston, second best number at plus 125. Even Purdue, less than $2 at this moment for the Boilermakers at plus 164. Purdue trying to get to the Final Four for the first time since 1980 in more than 4 decades, defining their season this time in the month of March. Tennessee at plus 330. Auburn and North Carolina, Craig, as it was in those national title odds, same exact price to reach the Final Four in Phoenix at plus 390. 2 days away, Craig Mish, just 2 from Selection Sunday, when the field of 68 in the 2024 men's NCAA tournament bracket is unveiled.
Can't wait for all of our coverage here on SportsGrid on Sunday night. Now, let's get to the previews and recaps of what we've seen in some of the tournaments. Coach Young is the best man to speak to that about. He joins us now here on the show ahead of some games being played at the Garden, by the way, not that far from Coach Young in our studios in New York as well. Hey, Coach, great to have you back here on NewsWire. What's going on, man?
It's going, Greg. Great, Craig. And just for people to know, Sunday, 7 to 10, Ben Stevens and I will have Bracket Central on SportsGrid. We'll go through the brackets. And, of course, my schedule ramps up next week with the tournament starting on Thursday.
Yeah, can't wait for all of it. And we still got to get there, though. We still got to get there. So let's preview some games, talk about some games that happen. All right, so St. John's wins yesterday. 91-72 is the final. And they beat Seton Hall. You know, I love talking. Anytime we could get a Rick Pitino into the conversation, I try to do it here. But now there's a big test, okay? Now that test is coming later this afternoon, 5:30 Eastern, against UConn. So let's talk about if you thought it was an impressive win yesterday. And again, we're talking about point spreads here, maybe not winning outright. If St. John stands a chance against one of the top teams in the country later today.
Well, they're playing a top team in the country, let's be very honest. But the Red Storm with a 91-72 win, avenging 2 regular season losses to Seton Hall. To me, it's about the fact that it was balanced. You had 6 players in double figures, 4 out of 5 starters got there. Soriano was huge, really beating up Bianco with 14 and 12. This is a different animal that they're facing today in UConn. UConn is just bludgeoning people with this wing ball screen offense, rolling Donovan Clingan to the basket, and either saying, you're taking the big, or you're going to help off, and we're going to space the floor with shooters. A UConn team that really turned it on in the second half versus Xavier, only 1-point lead at the break. Here's the thing, folks. I wouldn't play the spread, but if I'm Rick Pitino, I want this game up in pace. So maybe the way you look at it is something like a team total for UConn. Shop around, it's about 77.5. I think Rick is going to want to push the game, the pace, so that maybe you tire out Clingan, more possessions, more points. Look at the team total today for UConn. I think that's the best way to play it.
All right, fair enough. Now, Texas Tech pulls off the win against BYU. Congrats to them. And the reward for that is playing against Houston today, where the Cougars are 8.5-point favorites, total of 131.5. If UConn is the best team in the country, you can make the case Houston's number 2, maybe number 3, depending on how you feel about Purdue. 7 p.m. Eastern in the Big 12.
Folks, it's hard to go against Houston the way that they've played defense. If you think about it, the last 3 games, TCU, Kansas, I know Dickinson got hurt, but it was in the second half. It was a blowout. And South Florida, 45, 46, 59 points. They give up 56.5 points per game. And this is a team, folks, that is dialed in defensively. I think this is big for Kelvin Sampson to try and win this tournament, to cap off a great year. I'm going to go with Houston minus the points. Texas Tech is pretty good defensively as well. But Houston right now, Craig, is really on another level, the way that they can defend. And the fact that the way that they could score, I think LJ Cryer is starting to find his niche here. He is the leading scorer for the Houston Cougars, getting at about 15.4 points per game. Only 8, a very pedestrian effort. But if you look at the previous 4 games before that, take away 11 versus Kansas, which was a blow. They only played 27 minutes. 25, 23, 22. So look at someone like LJ Cryer's points prop, and I do like Houston minus the points today. I think they're playing, honestly, you could say they could be playing better than UConn, but if not, they're right there with them.
Yeah, and should get a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Arizona surging at the right time here. They beat USC yesterday, 70-49. Trojans had been playing pretty well up until running up against the Wildcats yesterday. And listen, this is a matchup that they got to like today. They're taking on Oregon, not one of the best teams, I don't think, in the Pac-12. 10.5-point favorites, 155.5. The total in this game. It's an 8 o'clock Eastern start. Coach, can Oregon keep it close? It's sort of a stunning outcome yesterday to see Arizona win by so much.
Well, if you look at it, they lost to Arizona by 9 at home, and they lost to Arizona by 20. Now, here's the thing, folks. Can Arizona repeat this? Because I actually did like USC, and I just thought that Arizona was in a bad mood after losing that game over the weekend to USC. So this is an Arizona team, folks, that when they want to play, they will play. Beat USC by almost, by 20-some-odd points. Won at UCLA by 20. Beat Oregon by 20. Beat at Arizona State by 18. Beat Washington by 16. This is a team that unless it's someone like Washington State, they get rolling here. I would go ahead and I would take USC. Now, here's the thing, folks. You may look at the line and you may get a little bit nervous here because it's a pretty big number for a conference tournament. So here's another way to play it, folks. How about you just see and take it in the first half? See if a team like Arizona comes out to play like they did last game and open up that lead. And they kind of opened it up late in that first half versus USC. Remember, folks, it was, I think, an 18-16 or 16-14 game. Maybe look at Arizona in the first half. Spread should probably be about 5.5 points. Maybe they jump a big run late in the half, start to put the game away. Take it that way instead if you don't want to take the whole game minus 10.5.
All right, a better play, I think, in that game. Now, the SEC coming down to the wire here. I know Auburn's playing South Carolina this afternoon. Tonight will be the game that I'll be focused on. And I think this has the makings of a great matchup here, Coach. I mean, when Florida played Alabama the first time, they went to overtime. The Gators almost won that game. It was when the Gators started turning things around in their season. Second time around, Gators beat Alabama. Neutral site here. Gators getting 3.5 points. That's not the story, though. Total is 170, Coach, in this game. This could be a really fun game tonight.
Folks, buckle up, because this game's going to be about pace. And an Alabama team that really wants to get you up and down the floor. Now, if you think about it, folks, and you go to the other games, 105-87, right, was the game that they played literally just last week. Other game, 98-93, overtime. Folks, pace. Sometimes you think about when you get into the tournament, you want to slow the game down. These two teams don't want to do that. If I take anything in this game, I'm looking at the over. I think this game gets up and down, a lot of possessions, over 170. It's moving. I see that 173.5 on FanDuel. Shop around, but I think this game goes over. I think there's going to be a lot of points tonight.
All right, let's close it out here, Coach. Any other games you're focused on today? I know we have games starting here in about 10 minutes.
Well, I think the game starting off right off the bat is Purdue. I think Purdue is going to go ahead and wipe the floor with Michigan State. They have to get going here. Also, folks, look at South Florida playing at 1 o'clock, -6.5 versus an East Carolina team. I think they are way better than. I think that's going to be interesting. But, folks, circle this 2:30 game. It's going to be interesting. Wisconsin, Northwestern. Wisconsin doesn't need this game, but this is about seeding. Interesting enough that they're starting to play a little bit better after having that rough patch. They are the road team, but they are the favorite. That game should be pretty interesting, tipping off at 2:30. And then last one, I think South Carolina getting 7.5 versus Auburn at 3:30. Lamont Parrish just signed this contract extension. That should quiet all the kids down to know that he's going to be their coach. They love him. I think it's a lot of points. South Carolina plus 7.5. As an underdog, they've been really, really good. Maybe look at that at 3:30 p.m. in the SEC.
Yeah, that does feel like the strangest line of the day, by the way. South Carolina's been good all year to get that many points this afternoon. I like that, Coach. I'll go with it. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire. Enjoy the action this weekend. We'll see you Sunday night. I know we'll see you before then, but we'll see you Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern live here on SportsGrid for Bracket Central. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire.
Hey, a lot of coffee and a lot of sleep, because I'm not going to get much of sleep, so it's going to be a lot of coffee for the next couple of weeks.
Coffee and sleep, Coach. I don't think that works. Sleep it in the coffee. I don't know. Anyway, seen that meme before. All right, Coach Young, you can catch him tomorrow and, of course, Sunday, all weekend long. It's time now. It's basketball time here on SportsGrid. Okay, we'll take one more time out. I'll preview some of the games about to start in college hoops. As Coach mentioned, a few big ones coming up in 10 minutes from now, and then a live look at the Players Championship leaderboard. We've got some players at the top that were not at the top 24 hours ago. So we'll tell you all about that next. Don't go away.
You can worry about Kentucky's maturity. I get it. Are you making a good point about it? Absolutely. They're young. They're inexperienced. They're going to make a ton of mistakes. Sometimes you can worry about their defensive tenacity. But boy, they got shot creators and they got shot makers.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Betting in game, there's a big difference, right? Like the computer changes the number so often. Like I tried to get this in right now, but in reality, as I saw plus 165 in the arena, they're hitting the shot. And I'm getting this like a couple of seconds late. And even the sports book, like technology can only like travel so fast.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
How about this? Nikola Jokic, heavy favorite here to -170 price, followed by SGA at +250, and Luka Doncic at a 7-1 price.
It would require a whole lot from Luka to like 15 of the next 20 games he has to have triple doubles, like something absurd. And it really just comes down to Jokic being amazing, doing everything he's doing. Like, I hate to say it, but he's probably had this locked up the second Embiid was announced out.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. The Early Line is coming up next at noon Eastern, but then Pharrell Coast to Coast is back at 3 o'clock Eastern for all of the live action in college basketball's conference tournament play. To give you an idea of some of the games that he'll be talking about, a couple tip-off very shortly. We got the Big Ten matchup between Michigan State and Purdue at 12 o'clock Eastern. UTEP with a big upset win yesterday. They play Sam Houston today at 12:30 Eastern, Sam Houston -4.5. We just discussed the SEC matchup at 3:30 Eastern between South Carolina and Auburn, with the Tigers laying 7.5. Tonight, Baylor takes on Iowa State in the Big 12, and that is a 9:30 Eastern start. Of course, I'll have my eye on the Gators tonight taking on Alabama in a late start for me after a little spring training action, which I think I'm headed to later today. And by the way, those of you into golf, I know you want to check this out. This is the live leaderboard, by the way. Players Championship. We wanted to save this best for last year. Matt Fitzpatrick is your leader. How about this? Maybe going into the weekend at 10 under. Wyndham Clark is 9 under through 10. JT Poston. Also Keith Mitchell. And as well as Scotty Scheffler. That was the name at the top of the leaderboard. Rory McIlroy early yesterday, but right now Scotty's still within very good striking range. 7 under par through 10. A handful of shots back of Matt Fitzpatrick. Also, a reminder, for those of you getting ready to draft fantasy baseball teams, me and Davis Maddock have a show for you tomorrow, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern. As always, Gray Albright from Razzball weighs in on the big Dylan Cease trade. Michael Kopech moving to closer for the White Sox. A lot happening in baseball in case you've been wrapped up in all of this basketball stuff this week. Also want to thank our producer, Michael Cohen, all week long, of course, as well as our executive producer, John Shames, as well as all of you for watching our shows here at SportsGrid and NewsWire. Thanks for being part of our little family. I hope you have a great weekend. If I don't see you tomorrow morning for fantasy sports, I'll see you Monday for our next edition of NewsWire. Enjoy all the madness. See you then.